Chapter 1: Advancing Toward Photography, The Birth of Modernity, Video Lecture Presentation A. Prehistoric Signatures. To the left is a painting titled Hand Stencils Around the Famous Dappled Horse of Peshmerel, France, circa 25,000 BCE. The desire to commemorate one's existence has been around since the prehistoric age. Cave paintings dating as far back as 25,000 to 40,000 BCE depict handprints or signatures of prehistoric artists. These signatures suggest the human desire to commemorate one's existence by saying, "I am human, I am here." Commemorating one's existence. The desire to make pictures by capturing the subject in a specific time and place is a primal, instinctual, and/or human urge. This urge is the basis of photography. The ancient Algerian cave painting depicted at the top commemorates early man hunting wild animals. The 18th century silhouette to the right commemorates this man's existence through profile drawing. The 19th century photograph to the far right is described as capturing the character of the sitter. In the 5th century, Chinese philosopher Mo Di offered the prototype of the pinhole camera. In 330 BCE, Aristotle wrote about a pinhole that captured the crescent-shaped image of the sun as it passed through leaves of a tree during a partial solar eclipse. Throughout history, philosophers and advocates of the modern scientific method used pinhole cameras in their studies to copy or draw an image. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the idea of photography has been around for a very long time. What is a pinhole camera? A pinhole camera is a box with a pinhole on one end. The pinhole permits light to enter the darkened box and illuminates the object it captures on the outside. The illuminated image inside the box appears inverted on the opposite wall. The pinhole camera was later known as a type of camera obscura, which is Latin for dark chamber. To the right is a drawing by Kirchner titled Large Portable Camera Obscura, 1646. A larger pinhole camera. The camera obscura is just like the pinhole camera. The painter enters a large room and sees the light filter through the hole on the opposite wall. The light projects an inverted color image on that wall. The painter then traces the image. These miracle paintings made the act of drawing much easier. The camera obscura is an example of how artists created images prior to the invention of photography. To the right is a drawing of a camera lucida, 1807, by William Hyde Wollaston. Camera lucida. Another example of how artists created images prior to the invention of photography is with the camera lucida. A glass prism is held at eye level by a brass rod attached to a flat drawing board. Artists look through a peephole at the center to see the subject and then to draw the subject. The machine was difficult to operate, however. Camera lucida is Latin for light room and was used as a sketching aid to help overcome one's lack of drawing skill. Did you know that the Industrial Revolution, the Age of Enlightenment, and the Romantic era also influenced the development of photography? To the right is an engraving of a spinning jenny by T. E. Nicholson, 1835. Below that is an engraving of the steam engine. Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution took place in Britain in the 18th and 19th centuries. Deposits of coal and iron ore, both necessary for industry, were abundant. The first inventions during this time were the spinning jenny and the steam engine. The Industrial Revolution moved society from agrarian to urban. With the invention of machines, factories, and mass production, people migrated to the cities in search of factory jobs. The standard of living was raised for the middle class. The 19th century ushered in the urban, industrial-based movement known as modernity. One of the Industrial Revolution's most notable inventions. In 1764, James Hargreaves built the spinning jenny, a machine in which thread was spun from corresponding sets of rovings and named after his daughter. Initially, the operator could spin 8 threads at once by the turn of a single wheel. This invention was improved upon and industrialized the way merchants made cloth from thread. Factories were born, and merchants were able to sell mass-produced products now. During the Age of Enlightenment, European politics, science, and philosophy were inspired by essays, books, laws, inventions, scientific discoveries, and revolutions. People questioned traditional authority and focused on improving humanity with rational change. To the right is a painting by Joseph Wright, Experiment on a Bird in the Air Pump, 1768. The Romantic era took place at the end of the 18th century and was a reaction to the Industrial Revolution, the Age of Enlightenment, and the scientific rationalization of nature. Romanticism focused on spontaneity, imagination, free expression, and the importance of nature. To the right is a painting by J. M. W. Turner titled The Slave Ship, 1840. Go to video lecture presentation B. Chapter 1, Advancing Toward Photography, The Birth of Modernity, Video Lecture Presentation B. Where did the demand for photography come from? The demand for photography came from the rising commercial class and from modernity. Like the rich, the commercial middle class wanted portraits, but paintings were costly. Modernity in the 18th century would bring new visual realities at affordable prices to the masses. So how did the middle class make portraits of themselves prior to the invention of photography? The Photooooooooo machine and lithography expanded portrait making to the middle class. Chrétien's Photooooooooo, 1786. The operator would trace a profile onto glass using a stylus engraving tool. Then a silhouette would get etched into a copper plate at a reduced scale. Tracing took about 1 minute and multiple copies could be made. Although not a camera, it reduced portrait making to a mechanical operation. This expanded portrait making to the middle class. To the right is an example of a Photooooooooo portrait by Fouquet, 1786. Lithography, 1796. Lithography is a method of drawing images on lithographic limestone plates. The process is concluded with the application of ink to print the image on paper. Lithography was more cost-effective for mass production. This lithograph, published in Association Mensuelle, illustrates an event that occurred during the riots of April 1834, when government troops opened fire on the inhabitants of a building. To the right is a lithograph by Daumier titled Rue Transnonain, 1834. Theatrical productions before photography. In Paris in 1800, a magic lantern known as the argand oil lamp was used to create rear screen images of ghosts, skeletons, and celebrities in a partially darkened theater. This fantastic production also included special effects like smoke and thunder. Prior to the invention of photography, 18th century audiences wanted to see projected images. New inventions like the argand-oil lamp helped to fulfill the desire for projected images. The argand-oil lamp was considered to be the first modern lighting system. Concentrated beams of light would project images onto the wall or screen. In 1826, Drummond oil, or limelight, replaced argand oil. To the left is an etching of Phantasmagoria, a form of horror theater using these magic lanterns. In the upper right-hand corner is a photograph example of an argand oil lamp. Other inventions before photography. Louis-Jacques Daguerre was a leading scene designer in Paris. In 1822, he created the first 350-seat diorama, which altered the way people experienced scenes or pictures by collapsing the single point of view that was integral to painting at the time. The audience embraced this because it was considered new and good. The audience was ready to consume new images of reality. The kaleidoscope was invented in 1815, followed by the zoetrope in 1834. The zoetrope is a circular drum with pictures pasted around the interior. Upon spinning the drum, the pictures are viewed through cutout holes from the outside. The zoetrope is a machine that generated a visual experience for the viewer as it spins by. In the upper left-hand corner is a drawing of a diorama, below that the drawing of a kaleidoscope, and to the right of that a drawing of Plateau's zoetrope, 1828. What is photography? Chemistry plus light equals photography. Where did the word photography come from? Etymology of the word photography comes from Greek roots. Photos equals light, graphy equals drawing. Photos plus graphy equals light drawing. So who invented photography? Well, the answer is complicated. Many people invented a version of photography, but only one man received the credit. Perhaps we should rephrase the question to simplify things. Let's rephrase the question to, who was given the credit for the invention of photography? Louis-Jacques Daguerre was given the credit for the invention of photography in 1839. To the right is a portrait of Louis-Jacques Daguerre by Nadar. Louis-Jacques Daguerre. On January 7, 1839, François Arago, an important scientist and politician, saw the value in the promise of this invention. Arago presented Daguerre's invention to the Academy of Arts and Sciences in Paris. Arago knew that the Academy would love this invention, and he wanted photography to be France's gift to the world. What ensued was daguerreotypomania. Daguerre was asked to publish a how-to manual, arranged for the sale of lenses, and also wooden box cameras. This is why we give the credit to for the invention of photography to Louis-Jacques Daguerre. Go to video lecture presentation C. Chapter 1, Advancing Toward Photography, The Birth of Modernity, video lecture presentation C. Photograph by Daguerre. Title, View of Boulevard du Temple, 1839. There were others who invented a version of photography and/or made advances in photography. Joseph Nicephore Niepce, Thomas Wedgwood, William Henry Fox Talbot, Sir John Herschel, Hippolyte Bayard, just to name a few. In the upper right-hand corner is a photograph of Sir John Herschel. Below that is Joseph Nicephore Niepce, and below that is a photograph of William Henry Fox Talbot. So how did Daguerre do it? In 1831, Daguerre was using highly polished silver plates, sensitizing them in the dark with heated iodine crystal vapors, placing them in the camera, and then making 1-hour exposures in bright sunlight. The results were highly detailed negative images. Silver plates plus iodine crystal vapors plus light equals a negative image. A few years later, Daguerre switched to heating the plate with mercury vapors. Mercury provided for a fragile but incredibly detailed image. The images had a shiny mirror-like surface reflecting off a dark background. The resulting picture was a positive image. If the background was bright, the image appeared as a negative. Mercury also had another beneficial side. It reduced exposure time to 20 minutes in bright sunlight. To the left is a graphic of a thinking person. Word spread about the invention of photography. Brazil, Germany, Spain, and Switzerland stepped forward with claims that they invented a photographic process as well. Question: how can so many people that have never met and live in different countries at the same time claim they invented a photographic process? Answer: simultaneous consciousness, perhaps? It is possible that an idea can occur to different people in different places at the same time. Joseph Nicephore Niepce was an inventor of a successful photographic process. Niepce developed the first system for making images permanently through the action of light. He created an original picture using a camera, a biconvex lens, and a diaphragm. In 1822, he discovered that bitumen, tar, was sensitive to light and used it as a developer. Alas, the dream of an automatic picture was born. His developed image formed a negative. Niepce also used silver-surfaced copper plates to deliver positive images. He called them heliographs. The photograph by Niepce, View from the Window of Le Gras, is the oldest surviving permanent camera-based photograph. To the right is a photograph by Joseph Nicephore Niepce titled View from his Window at Le Gras, 1826-1827. Thomas Wedgwood. Thomas Wedgwood placed flat objects on paper coated with silver nitrate, and images would be transferred through the agency of light. However, he could not stop the action of light from causing the image to darken over time. Wedgwood could only show these images by candlelight in darkened rooms. He needed to find a method to chemically fix the image to the paper and remove the light-sensitive, insoluble silver salts. Robert Hirsch, author of our text, Seizing the Light, refers to it as a paradoxical problem. Hirsch suggests that the very agency used to create the photo was the very agency that brought about its destruction. Daguerre used strong salt solutions to stop the action of light initially. Others came up with similar ideas that worked. Sir John Herschel found a photographic fixer in using sodium thiosulfate, also known as hyposulfite of soda. The chemical dissolves silver chloride, thus successfully stopping the action of light. To the left is a portrait of Thomas Wedgwood. To the right is a picture of the light streaming over the ocean in the clouds, with the phrase from the Bible, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." William Henry Fox Talbot picked up where Thomas Wedgwood left off 30 years before. In 1834, scientist, scholar, and Englishman William Henry Fox Talbot had devised a version of a camera-based imaging system. Photogenic drawings were prepared by soaking a piece of good quality drawing paper in a weak solution of common salt, allowing this paper to dry, brushing it with a solution of silver nitrate, and then further washing it in a strong solution of common salt. Exposure was usually made by contact printing for as long as it took an image to appear. This image would then be fixed. Talbot used a strong solution of common salt for this, or, occasionally, potassium iodide. Sir John Herschel's hypofixer, sodium thiosulfate, dissolved away any remaining silver nitrate more efficiently and subsequently became the standard for all silver processes. To the right is a photogenic drawing negative of Laycock Abbey by Talbot, 1835-1839. Below that is Latticed Window at Laycock Abbey by Talbot, 1835, another example of a negative photogenic drawing, and below that is Latticed Window, Laycock Abbey, 1835, by Talbot, an example of a positive form, perhaps the oldest extant photographic negative made in a camera. Talbot's rush to make permanent images. Talbot knew that fast, permanent, and accurate images were the brass ring, and had heard of Daguerre's success in 1839. He scrambled to stake his own claim in the invention of photography. He later discovered gallic acid and invented the calotype process, which will be discussed in week/module 3. Ultimately, it was Daguerre's image that met expectations better when considering what a picture should look like. Anna Atkins. Anna Atkins published illustrated images of Sir John Herschel's photographic process. Atkins constructed many photogram images of algae, feathers, and water weeds using Herschel's invention called cyanotype. Herschel created cyanotype, a blueprint method that made fast copies. Herschel was able to record natural color images of the spectrum without using dyes, but rather by using the chemical silver bromide. Herschel was one of the first to use the words negative or positive, and also the word photography. Atkins published and distributed volumes with illustrated images using Sir John Herschel's method. To the right is a photograph by Anna Atkins titled Flagellatum Algae, 1840s to 1850s. She's one of the first female photographers. Hippolyte Bayard. Hippolyte Bayard was a French civil servant who worked on the invention of photography during the same time period as Daguerre and Talbot. He displayed his pictures but published his findings too late because Daguerre had already been awarded the acknowledgement. He created Self-Portrait as a Drowned Man as a performance-based joke. This is a self-portrait that suggests he committed suicide over his struggle with the invention and his disappointment of not receiving accolades for his contributions to the medium of photography. To the right is a photograph by Hippolyte Bayard titled Self-Portrait as a Drowned Man, 1840. What about the painters? What did the painters think of photography? Some painters embraced photography and never looked back. Some found it useful, especially in the study of light. Others feared it and worried it would threaten their livelihood. What happened to Louis Daguerre, the man who was credited with the invention of photography? After his meteoric rise to fame and the outbreak of daguerreotypomania, Daguerre lost interest in photography. He later moved to the countryside, began painting, and fell into obscurity. Louis Daguerre died in 1851. You have completed Chapter 1. Chapter 2, The Daguerreotype, Image and Object. Video Lecture Presentation A. The two photographs depicted are of Queen Victoria and the royal family. Daguerreotypomania. Daguerreotype reigned from 1839 to 1850s. Photographers took pictures of anything that light would shine upon. Prior to the invention of photography, the 19th century wealthy could act on the desire to commemorate their own likeness through portrait painting. In this new era, the daguerreotype provided both ordinary people and the affluent access to pictures and picture-making systems. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were great supporters and patrons of this new invention called photography. Notice all the photographers and cameras in the lithograph to the left. Lithograph by Theodore Morissette, title Fantasies la Daguerreotypomania, December 1839, 9 by 14, hand-colored lithograph. To the right is a photograph, unknown maker, titled Seated Young Woman, circa 1850, daguerreotype. Below that, to the right, unknown maker, Dog sitting on a table, 1854, American hand-colored daguerreotype. The special qualities of the daguerreotype. Daguerreotype shared both two- and three-dimensional object qualities. The highly polished silver surface of the copper plate had a mirror-like brilliance and provided great visual depth. It rendered incredible detail, making the images seem to rise from the surface and give a three-dimensional sense. The surface shimmered and provided great visual splendor. It had a sparkly gem-like quality, a magical realism that does not reveal itself well on a computer or printed pages of a text. It also captured the viewer's own reflection and provided a sense of traveling back in time. It was meant to be held in hand and not hung on a wall, per se. While holding it in one's hand, the constant flickering between positive and negative images conveying two views of a person, thus lending another peek into the character of the sitter. Daguerreotype, a spontaneous or planned act. Making a daguerreotype was time-consuming. It had a very long exposure time, so the sitter had to sit still for quite some time. Making a daguerreotype was not spontaneous, but rather a planned and executed act. Poses were premeditated. The daguerreotype revealed its potential to replace hand-done procedures carried out by skilled artisans. To the right is a daguerreotype camera built by La Maison Suy Fiers in 1839, with a lens by Charles Chevalier. Using a daguerreotype to make a lithograph and provide copies for dissemination. The lithograph of the work to the right, Fountain of the Boulevard Saint-Martin, was drawn from a daguerreotype photograph. An alliance was forged between photography and printmaking. Western audiences wanted views of historical European sites, and a new market opened up to reproduce numerous copies for dissemination of such cultural icons. Daguerreotype views of familiar places were traced and transferred onto copper plates by aquatint process and published in 1841–43 as excursion daguerreans, or views of remarkable monuments around the globe. To the right, unidentified maker, French, Les Châteaux d'Eau, Marche aux Fleurs, Fountain of the Boulevard Saint-Martin, Flower Market, circa 1825 lithograph. Early daguerreotype portrait making was painful. The first portrait gallery opened in 1840. The studio only operated on sunny days. Practitioners used mirrors to harvest and reflect sunlight on sitter's face. On cloudy days, exposures could last 8 minutes or longer. It was difficult to sit still for so long. American essayist and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson described the difficulty and pain in sitting still for a photograph, and especially the clenched muscles and muscle aches due to long exposure time. To the right is a daguerreotype photograph of Henry Fitz Jr., self-portrait with eyes closed, 1839–1840. Fitz Jr. sat for 5 minutes in full sun, as still as possible, with eyes closed. Daguerreotype comes to America. The daguerreotype instruction manual arrived in New York. The process of democratizing visual representations was furthered. Collaborating between the photographer, sitter, and what was revealed about the sitter created the basis for portraiture. Early daguerreotypists were men of means, education, and money. Some had scientific, technical experience, or artistic training. At first, the process was expensive and difficult, but advances in photographic chemistry were made, and portraiture became cheaper and easier to do. Eventually, photography was taken to its highest level of excellence through the emergence of a group of new, aspiring professionals. To the right is a daguerreotype photograph by Carl Ferdinand Stelzner, titled Mother Alber's The Family Vegetable Woman, 1845. Photography democratized portraiture by making it economically feasible for ordinary working people to have their likeness memorialized. Go to Video Lecture Presentation B. Chapter 2, The Daguerreotype, Image and Object, Video Lecture Presentation B. The American Dream. Daguerreotype offered some unemployed and entrepreneurs a second chance and an opportunity to live the American dream. Europeans saw America as a land of opportunity and the restorer of dignity through willpower and hard work. Daguerreotypes appealed to America's frontier mentality as well as its infatuation with machines that made tasks easy to perform. Daguerreotype was making a lasting impression. Fear of photography. Honoré de Balzac, founder of realism in European literature, considered the photographer a danger for metaphysical reasons. He believed bodies were made up of a finite number of leaf-like skins, and with each picture taken, a layer was removed and transferred to the image. Each exposure meant the irreplaceable loss of another ghostly layer, the very essence of life. Danger of photography. Some artists were afraid daguerreotype would destroy their livelihood. The French painter Paul Delaroche said, "Painting is dead," upon seeing the daguerreotype. He was obviously wrong about this most powerful artistic medium. Photography becomes commercial. John Plumb Jr., 1841, established a commercial enterprise, taking portraits, selling materials, providing instructions, and working in color. Plumb Jr. collected celebrity portraits and publicized them as lithographs. His business grew to 25 galleries. In 1845, he offered photographs for about $1 each. The photographer or operator did not get the credit. Each work was stamped with the owner's name of Plumb. To the right is a photograph by John Plumb Jr., Portrait of a Man Reading a Newspaper, 1842, daguerreotype. The celebrity portrait and publicity. Matthew Brady opened a gallery, promoted celebrity portraits, and sent his pictures to the new picture papers. During this era, the only way for a newspaper to print photographs on their pages was by converting the photograph into a wooden engraving illustration. While the photograph provided free publicity to the celebrity, it also promoted the photographer's portrait business, as well as the communications industry. Statistics. By 1853, 1,000 New Yorkers, including women and children, worked in the photographic trade. Women did a lot of hand coloring. 37 of New York's 86 studios were on Broadway. Workers were paid $1.50 per day if skilled and $1 or less per day if unskilled. An underground market grew out of this. Illegal pornographic daguerreotypes were being made and sent via mail order. James Presley Ball, Sr. was a free African-American male who became a celebrated Daguerrean photographer. Ball opened a gallery called the Great Daguerrean Gallery of the West in Cincinnati, where he created an 1,800-foot-long panorama on the slave trade. Ball photographed Frederick Douglass and the family of Ulysses S. Grant. With his son, he expanded his photography business, opening numerous galleries. To the left is a photograph of James Presley Ball, Sr. by Esther Ball Mumford. In 1855, Ball and a team of African-American artists created this large panorama titled Mammoth Pictorial Tour of the United States, comprising views of the African slave trade. This work consisted of 2,400 square yards of canvas. Ball wrote an accompanying pamphlet detailing the horrors of slavery from capture in Africa through Middle Passage to bondage. To the left is the cover of the pamphlet. Ball's Great Daguerrean Gallery of the West quickly became one of the most well-known galleries in the United States and was featured in the wood engraving on the left called Gleason's Pictorial Drawing Room Companion, April 1, 1854. To the right is a photograph by James Presley Ball, Sr. of Frederick Douglass, 1869, daguerreotype. Go to Video Lecture Presentation C. Chapter 2, the Daguerreotype Image and Object, Video Lecture Presentation C. Rural practices. Traveling daguerreotype salons would visit rural towns where most people lived. They would rent a few rooms, pass out handbills, or place ads in local papers, and wait for customers. When demand dropped off, they would move on to the next town. To the right is an example of a handbill passed out. Postmortem photographs. Postmortem photographs permitted people to memorialize their loved ones in death. During the 18th and 19th century, one usually died at home. Postmortem pictures were probably the only picture one had of their loved one, especially infants and young children. To the right is an example of a postmortem photograph. Unknown photographer, woman holding baby, 1855, daguerreotype with applied color. Both of these photographs are great examples of the crisp, clear, three-dimensional quality of the daguerreotype. Southworth and Hawes was a successful photograph firm in Boston that took this photograph of Roland Heber Neal, pastor of First Baptist Church, Boston, 1850, daguerreotype. Below, unknown photographer, butterfly collector, 1850, daguerreotype. Daguerreotype and the invention of the vacation picture. The desire to see nature's wonders created the inexpensive ability to transport people to inaccessible areas and converted natural sites into tourist attractions. One such spot was Niagara Falls. The first daguerreotype of Niagara was taken in 1840 by Lee Patterson. He was an English metallurgist looking for a mining investment. The views he made on the Canadian side of the falls are the first examples of the daguerrean process in Canada. On the American side of the falls, a man named Platt D. Babbitt monopolized the Niagara Falls view, and especially people taking in the view, thus joining them to the scene. This new view of people in nature became the formula. Alas, the vacation picture was born. To the right, photograph by Platt D. Babbitt, titled Tourists Viewing Niagara Falls from Prospect Point, 1855, daguerreotype with applied color. The daguerreotype as scientific witness, and the miniaturization of data. John Whipple took daguerreotype views of the moon from the Harvard College Observatory in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Daguerreotype and science looked at nature differently thanks to the invention of the telescope and microscope. They revealed an immense systematic cosmos which would make daguerreotype a reliable scientific witness. The daguerreotype dispersed new knowledge to a large audience, offering fresh ways of knowing the universe. Photographs were now acceptable as the normal appearance of things and used for study purposes instead of the actual subjects. William H. Good of Yale University was making daguerreotypes for a solar microscope, thus setting the precedent for the miniaturization of data. To the right is a photograph by John Whipple titled The Moon, 1852, daguerreotype. Daguerre's legacy. The daguerreotype did eventually decline in the 1850s. However, it created the archetype invention that fulfilled the desire to commemorate one's existence and one's world. Daguerreotype ultimately and most importantly transformed how society viewed time and space. William M. Ivins, Jr. suggested that through photography, art and science had their most striking effect upon the thought of the average man of today. You have completed Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Calotype Rising, The Arrival of Photography, Section A. To the right is a photograph of William Henry Fox Talbot, Encyclopedia Britannica Online. Calotype was advantageous but expensive. William Henry Fox Talbot had a two-step negative-positive print system which was both advantageous and expensive. Sadly, Talbot was not taken seriously at first and was not offered pensions or honors for his invention. Talbot was his own advocate and patented his own process, but his high license fees made his patent unprofitable and prohibited growth of photography in England. To the left is a photograph by Talbot titled Bust of Patroclus, 1843, salted paper print from negative. To the right is a photograph by unknown photographer titled Butterfly Collection, 1850, daguerreotype. Daguerreotype versus calotype. While daguerreotype had intense details, some considered it detrimental to effect. Calotype had a visual softness which neutralized singular details over universal details. Calotype had a matte surface image filled with contrast. Calotype provided emotional strength from tonal masses, darker areas. To be able to control tonality was considered a mark of artistry. Calotype could be manipulated before a print was produced by adding albumin and iodizing salt solutions to increase light sensitivity. Also, waxing the negative with beeswax made paper more transparent and increased visual detail. Calotype, pros and cons. Pros: the successful union of light and paper. Ability to make a positive and a negative. Mass production is easier now. Cons: prints faded over time. Process was slow due to impure chemicals. Paper was undesirable because fibers were visible and created a grainy effect. This effect was referred to as soft and painterly, and this would be embraced later on. Example of Romantic Painting by Delacroix, titled Liberty Leading the People, 1830 Oil Painting. Example of Romantic Photography by Talbot, Tomb of Sir Walter Scott, Dryburgh Abbey, Scotland, 1844, Calotype. What is the Romantic aesthetic? Calotype was grounded in Romantic aesthetics of its generation. Romanticism prized emotional experience. Romanticism was not only a return to nature, rushing brooks, and architectural ruins, it was a reaction against the established state, church, enlightened thought, and manifestations of the political spirit of the French Revolution as depicted in this famous painting by Delacroix. Romanticism began in England during the late 18th century as a pictorial device to help viewers negotiate the space and find their place in nature. Romantic photographs are thoughtful, emotional, and shadowy. Some romantic photographs are about the sublime and the beautiful. Romantic photographs. These photographs are a pictorial tribute to Sir Walter Scott's romantic concepts of the Gothic and picturesque. The photos feature warm, luxurious tones, soft delineations of tones, and disintegrated structures. The photographs reveal a mysterious and eerie, dramatic use of light that emphasizes light and shadow in these secluded settings and undisturbed vistas. To the right is a photograph by Talbot titled Tomb of Sir Walter Scott, Dryburgh Abbey, Scotland, 1844. To the right of that, another photograph by Talbot titled Sun Pictures in Scotland, Loch Katrine, 1845. In the lower left-hand corner is a photograph by Talbot titled Bust of Patroclus, 1843, salted paper print from negative, and to the right of that is a photograph by Talbot titled Sun Pictures in Scotland, Sir Walter Scott's Favorite Dog, 1845. The bust of Patroclus shows the choice of angles the photographer used, the type of light, and the scale. Other pictures reveal Calotype's ability to trap a multitude of minute details which add to the truth and reality of the representation. Go to Section B. Chapter 3, Calotype Rising, The Arrival of Photography, Section B. To the right is a photograph by Talbot titled The Open Door, 1843, printed in The Pencil of Nature. Talbot's Open Door. This photograph represents a scene from everyday life. The outside is bathed in light, while the interior is opaqued and filled with shadows. Is this work merely about a broom resting on a wall, or is it something more? Perhaps the contrast of light and dark is a metaphor for life and death, good and evil, or simply nothing at all. Below is a photograph of Talbot's photographic printing factory depicting some of the services it provided. Talbot created a standardization of process. Talbot's photographic printing establishment, 1845. Talbot photographed daily activities on his estate. He made about 20 calotypes per day, suggesting the ease in which they were made. The negative could be prepped right before. thus freeing up the callotypist from needing a darkroom for every exposure. Constance Talbot printed them. She was the first woman photographic processor. The Pencil of Nature was the first book to illustrate callotypes by Talbot. It was available by subscription only. This helped Talbot realize his dream of owning a printing and publishing house. Talbot's image selections illustrated his belief that subject matter is subordinate to exploration of space and light. Callotype was richly practiced in England and, after lifting the patent restrictions, the callotype prices were reasonable. Callotype's ability to reproduce prints made it attractive, and daguerreotypists adopted the process. Realists claim that photography's ability to provide a precise representation of reality, that the camera's ability to take straightforward reproductions, makes it a unique form of art that should be held sacred. Others believe that photographs were manipulations of reality and that reworked photographs set it apart from simple reproductions. Ideas such as these led to photography's acceptance as a true art form. Below is a composite photograph of Hill, left, and Adamson, both circa 1845. Hill and Adamson was among the finest callotype portrait studios. Subjects posed in sunlight, and photographers diffused light on subjects with a concave mirror to create dramatic effects of light and dark, also known as chiaroscuro. Hill and Adamson photographers knew that good photographs were the result of conscientious photographers who did not just point the camera and shoot with the expectation of a perfect result. Fixing the fading problem. A downside to callotype process was that the photographs faded over time. A group was organized to investigate this and discovered that leaving residue of hyposulfite of soda in paper fibers was the cause. In 1847, Louis Desiré Blanquart Evrard discovered that soaking paper in the emulsion, rather than brushing it on, made the paper more sensitive, eliminated streaking, and produced a longer and more continuous tonal scale. Highlights, details, and shadows were enhanced with this method. A few years later, he used albumin, egg whites, to coat paper, and the result was more contrast. Albumin became the preferred process until it was replaced by a gelatin print at the end of the 19th century. Blanquart Everard's photos were uniform in quality and did not fade. He opened a print enterprise in 1851 and developed a method to increase the number of prints made from a single negative at about 3 or 4 a day to a few hundred per day and then several thousand. It was an assembly line operation and employed up to 40 people. It was not a financial success, however. He collaborated with British callotypist Thomas Sutton and brought the British and French callotypist community closer together. Below is a drawing of workers on the assembly line. Go to Section C. Chapter 3, Callotype Rising, The Arrival of Photography, Section C. Gustave Le Gray. Gustave Le Gray took up photography after studying painting. He got people interested in callotype. He waxed negatives and prepped them in advance, which allowed for greater retention of detail and reduced exposure time for moving subjects. His series, Forest of Fontainebleau, were pictures of moving foliage. Le Gray was able to retain the velvety, ethereal shimmer of rich foliage, permitting viewers to move in deep space of forest settings. Upper left-hand corner is a photograph by Le Gray titled Moving Foliage, 1852. Below that, another photograph by Le Gray titled Single Tree, 1852. In the upper right-hand corner is a photograph by Charles Negre titled Chimney Sweeps Walking, 1851. Below that, another photograph by Negre titled Little Rag Picker, 1851. Charles Negre. Charles Negre learned from Gustave Le Gray and was a model for photographers who used observation and reason to produce highly selected renditions of what he saw through the lens. His Little Rag Picker was regarded less a photograph and more a conscientious and envisioned act of art. He reached a point where he wanted to explore general scenes of Parisian street life featuring working-class people. No longer are upper-class subjects dominating as subject matter. Negre represents everyday life. To satisfy the pre-snapshot impulse for instantaneous street pictures, he fabricated a fast lens which increased lens speed. He was able to stop the action in order to give the spontaneous quality of a snapshot. To the right is a photograph by Charles Negre, titled The Vampire. Henri Lessec appears near a gargoyle at Notre Dame, 1851, salted paper print. The Vampire, 1851, by Negre was taken from the balustrade above the Grand Gallery of Notre Dame. Negre juxtaposes monumental shapes with differentiating light and dark sectors. The contrast of light and dark produce a magnetic force across the picture's surface, where a man in a top hat stands out against the white sky. He opaqued the negative for emphasis and used pencil shading to accentuate highlighted areas of the gargoyle, the floral design, and the top of the balustrade, and the buildings below. The compressed tonal ranges of the photograph provides warmth and a strong tactile sense of the stone surface of the church. Space became self-animated and possesses a vibrant glowing quality of movement. A worldwide trend in documenting historical sites has begun. In 1851, the Missions Héliographiques was formed to record the important monuments of France, which were endangered by deterioration and indifference. Calotype's ability to be reproduced and the ease of preparation in the outdoors would serve the needs of this group. This was the first government sponsorship of a major photographic project. A core group of the Missions Héliographiques was instrumental in forming the Société Héliographique, the world's first photographic association. The goal of this association was to disseminate information, provide a forum for practitioners, and professionalize the practice. In the upper right-hand corner is a photograph by Henri Lessec, Léon Cathedral, 1851, France, calotype. Henri Lessec learned calotype from Legray. He made a series of investigations for the mission's projects. He created formal frontal compositions that concentrated on the relationship between the building and the angle of the camera. He was able to take general views that emphasized the mass of the structure and intricate details. He relied on the flow of upward movement and the spiritual quality of geometry to create his works. Lower right-hand corner is a photograph by Charles Marville, La Porte Rouge, Notre Dame de Paris, salted paper prints. Charles Marville was an engraver and lithographer who took up photography in 1850. For 20 years, he recorded Paris neighborhoods being destroyed and rebuilt by Napoleon III's urban renewal project. His work revealed his eye for detail and his desire to create contrasts between light and dark. The future of calotype. America never embraced calotype. Americans did not want to pay Talbot's licensing fees and preferred daguerreotype for its dazzling details. Talbot was also a British aristocrat, and the American Revolution was still in the American consciousness. The future would usher in a new process, consisting of glass negatives with a wet collodion process on albumen paper. This would bring calotype and daguerreotype to an end. Calotype did shape photography's future by demonstrating its potential to become an instrument of individual artistic expression, as well as a driving social force. You have completed Chapter 3.